Business of Property podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm Simon.
We talk every week about the reality of running property businesses. Simon has a number of buy-to-lets and runs Patma, which is a leading portfolio management software system and a source of property market insights.
Stuart runs a portfolio of co-living properties with a six-figure turnover and also has a property investment consultancy.
And before we start today's episode, as always, a couple of quick requests. Don't forget, you can now join the email Bop Tribe. And thank you to those that have so far. We promise we are going to get ourselves in order and start getting the emails out soon. And we're going to get lots of useful insights and stats out for you. And second request from us today, if you've listened to more than 2 episodes, then surely you like what we do. And if you like what we do, let us know by at least leaving a little rating on your podcast player of choice. Wherever that is, just leave a review. Really helps us. We're just very keen to now start getting this message out to more people. And quick thank you to Dan Paul, who did reach out to us on Twitter. Dan, thanks for your kind words. Glad you're enjoying the show and look forward to hearing how you get on at the start of your journey. Okay, now moving forward to the exciting bit. Now, this exciting bit is exciting because Simon has developed some predictions for this year, and I can hear you groaning, oh no, more predictions. It's the end of January. What are they doing? But I wanted to hear Simon's predictions because I haven't heard them yet. And Simon said, Stuart, please be honest with your feedback, even when we record. So, gentlemen and lady listeners, when Simon details his predictions, you will get my immediate honest response, whether or not he's lost the plots or if maybe he does know something about the property world after all.
Well, I don't know about prediction, but I seem to have a slightly different recollection of our planning for this episode.
He's backtracking already.
I'm happy to put out the predictions. I mean, I'm eminently not qualified to do so, but then I don't think anyone who makes predictions is really qualified. You cannot foretell the future.
No, and I will just caveat and preface this with one serious point. This is not to constitute any financial advice at all in any way, shape or form. It's just 2 middle-aged men having a talk about what might happen in the future, mainly Simon and then Stuart, to just respond to those predictions.
In a very kind and gentle way, I'm sure. Right, so in my folly, I have created some predictions for the value of houses, the house prices, however you want to refer to it, and base rate, so Bank of England base rate, and what might happen to that, and mortgages sort of related to that. So where would you like me to start, Stuart?
Property prices, that's what we're interested in, Simon. What's going to happen?
Well, then surely we should save those for last, if they're the best bit.
Bank of England base rate. Start with the easy one then.
Okay, right. I think you're right. I think this is the easy one. So I've heard lots of different predictions on this, and I'm not going to deviate far from what other people seem to be suggesting. I think it's quite widely suggested that they're going to go up to about 4.5%, and I agree. It's going to go up to about 4.5%. I think they will go up to that point, and then I think they will probably hold for most of the year at around that level. I think towards the end of the year, they will probably try to squeeze out a little bit of a reduction. So my prediction is that we're going to go up to 4.5, maybe 4.75 at the absolute most, and then I think there's going to be a 0.25% drop in the last quarter of the year.
I don't think anyone can disagree with you. Obviously, the latest expected rise will come next week from the Bank of England, and many are predicting it to be 0.5%, which would take us to 4%. And given the number of increases we had last year, we can't imagine there'll be that many. And as I've heard other people talking about and read, we know that a lot of these financial levers take a while to filter through into the real world. So, yeah, I think that's fair, Simon. I think you've gone straight down the middle of the road. I think we'll just give that one a little tick. Should be okay.
Woohoo! We've started well. Let's see if we can go downhill from there.
So mortgages, I think that's a natural progression from Bank of England, given we know that obviously mortgage rates are highly linked to these things. So what are you thinking about there?
Indeed. So I'm probably not going to surprise anyone with this either. I think that mortgage rates will probably hold at around where they are now. So some will go up a bit, some will go down a bit as different companies play around with their rates and things. But despite the base rate going up, overall, I think mortgage rates are going to roughly hold. And that obviously means that the sort of profit margin for the mortgage companies is going to be squeezed a bit. However, I think they are going to continue to have quite high fees. So rather than being, I don't know, £1,000 fee for a new mortgage, I think you're going to be looking at sort of the 2-3% fees, which obviously in bigger mortgages works out to be quite a bit more. And sort of the bigger thing that I think I would like to predict with mortgages is that they are going to be troubling lots of people. Okay, that's not really controversial. What is perhaps a little bit more controversial is that I think the government are going to have to step in and do something to try and ease this pain for people. I don't quite know what it's going to be. I don't know whether they'll lean on mortgage companies and just manage to convince them to be more lenient, or whether they will actually have to do something more specific and more direct. But otherwise, I think there is going to be a big increase in people behind on their mortgage payments and an increase in repossessions filtering through. So I think mortgage rates overall not really going to go up in line with base. I think they're going to stay roughly where they are now for the whole of the year. And I think there's going to be something relatively significant from the government to help people out with that in some way, shape or form.
Well, sadly, there's nothing there that I can get my teeth in to really challenge you on, because I think that's a really good review of where we're at, actually, in terms of the mortgage rates. And one thing we saw certainly at the second half of last year was that when the Bank of England talked about where they were going with the interest rates, we saw an immediate settling down of mortgage rates. And I think now that there is more of a plan in place, dare I say it, from the powers that be in terms of this country, it feels like, I don't want to say stability because we're not there yet, but it feels like we're a little bit more closer to having some sort of stable approach. So I would agree. And I really liked your point around mortgage fees, actually, because I've been looking at a few mortgages, and that is something which has come up more than I've seen before in terms of the mortgage options we've had. There are a lot more fees being attached to them. I used to have many more options where the fees, whether without fees, certainly for residential. I'm talking about residential here, not buy to let, because I was buying for myself. And I'd noticed that from a residential perspective, whereas previously I hadn't. So that's clearly something that's definitely happening. So I would agree with that. And I think the news for us as investors is to keep an eye on that, because if they are stable, that's great. We talked in last week's episode about rents increasing, so that helps. But we've just got to see where this is going to go for the next sort of quarter or so. The thing that always interests me personally is the price to earnings ratio, because that's always a good indicator of what's happening. And that is coming down in terms of, so we know that the house prices are dropping. We've talked about that again last week. So the price to earnings ratio is coming down. And I'm interested to see how this plays out myself. And with stabilised mortgage rates, does that mean if that keeps coming down, is it just a price-based thing or factor? So, yeah, I think that's a good summary. So I think that takes us to, your pièce de résistance, which is property prices.
Yeah, see if we can find something that you can disagree with more heartily here. So I tend to err away from making predictions, especially predictions as far away as 12 months. My goodness. I'm much keener on looking at the data now. And I'm very keen on having very up-to-date data. So you can look at what's happening right now and the trend in the last few weeks or maybe months. And therefore you can sort of predict forwards a little bit for a few weeks, maybe months, fairly reliably by just sort of following that trend line. So taking a leap out into the far distant future, as I'm about to do, is definitely something I wouldn't normally be keen on doing. But I thought it might just be a bit of fun. And as Stuart said, do not base any investment decisions on what I'm about to say or what we're discussing generally this week. We often discuss very, very clear facts and figures. This week is very much speculation and intended as a bit of fun. Unlike some people, if we do terribly, I'm fairly certain that we will completely ignore this episode ever existed and not review it next year. So
we shall never come back here again.
Unless I'm absolutely spot on, in which case we will
we
revisit it.
We shall never come back here again.
No, we will revisit it. But it's okay. I can't imagine that's going to be the case. So a little bit of background to my thinking on this prediction before I actually put my neck on the line. So property prices in the last 12 months have been on a bit of a roller coaster. They went up very rapidly early in the year. And this was actually on the back of pretty rapid increases the year before as well. And then in the last, roughly half of the year, they have been falling relatively dramatically, such that we don't actually have the figures yet because there's a lag in these numbers. But the January 2023 year-on-year growth figure for property values is probably, I think, going to be in the range of 0 to 1%. Now, we already know that the figure for November, December sort of time is not much more than that. So I think I'm fairly safe in that prediction. That's not very much of a prediction.
Yeah, November, December, somewhere between 2 and 4% for those 2 months.
Yeah. And the sort of, for some context to that, the year-on-year growth in January 2022, so a year ago, was 9.6%. So we've gone from a 9.6% growth year, which is obviously quite high, quite a lot, to an almost or around 0% growth year in the last 12 months. So that's already what's happened, or probably happened. So then I'm going to come in with a prediction for January 2024, the year-on-year growth, or rather, I think it's going to be a year-on-year fall, and I think it's going to be roughly 10%. Now, I've heard lots of people say that they think it might even be a growth year. I've heard other people say that we're looking at 30%. It's going to be a crash. But I don't think either of those are going to be right. I think we are going to see a gradual, steady decline throughout pretty much the whole year. So I think it will probably be a bad start to the year. And then things will probably ease off, pick up a little bit in the middle-ish of the year. But then I think we're going to finish badly again at the end of the year. And overall, I think that's just going to be a gradual ebbing away that leads to a 10% year-on-year fall by January 2024.
So you're thinking about the 12 months to January for that year?
Yep.
10%. So, okay, let's just have a look at this. So again, these aren't actuals because I'm looking at a chart which is a line chart which trends over time for the last few years. But roughly, January 2020, 2%. January 21, 6%. We're talking positive, obviously, here. January 22, you've said that was somewhere between 9 and 10%, I think. So you're expecting a swing. You're expecting a swing year on year. So if we think about the UK house price now, we've just come down to about 260. So you think they're going to drop to 240, to about 235, which let's say, the listeners are getting a good sight of how I think here. So I'm just going to average you. So that would take us back to, looks like mid 2021 prices.
Yep. I was thinking that as well. Yep. That's what I reckon.
I think that's really high. I'm actually quite pleased you've gone for it.
But by high, do you mean
high as in low? So as in I think that's the drop is too deep. So yeah, I don't want to get into this conversation, but I would.
You see, you thought you'd just just be critiquing my predictions without making any predictions of your own. But in actual fact, in order to critique mine, you've got to make your own.
He's trapped me. He's trapped me. It's like my son now plays chess, and it's really bothering me that he can think probably 3 moves ahead of me, which you've just done. Yeah, I'd posit more of a flatness than a drop. That's what I would go for. So although we're seeing the prices drop now, and I can see them dropping further on average for this year, I do see a sort of rally, which is more of a sort of plateau, I suppose. So, yeah, I'd be really interested to see how that one plays out. And, I'm glad we've done this. So I'm just writing down minus 10% Simon. There we go.
put it in writing so I can't back out later. Yeah, okay. It's okay. We're recording it. I can't back out anyway.
But it is interesting. I know I just mentioned this before about the price to earnings ratio, but the bit I didn't say was that the reason I sort of think about that is because obviously if those prices come down, what I'm thinking is obviously, I hate saying inflation because we hear so much about it, but assuming that most wages will start to catch up at some point, the ratio should decrease. The ratio should decrease. So,
yeah, so exactly. So salaries are going to be going up gradually as people sort of provide some salary increases, roughly inflation, roughly a bit less than inflation, but they're still going up. And house prices, if they just stay level, then that means the price to earnings ratio is going to improve. People are going to be able to afford things more. My thinking is based much more on how I think people are going to be feeling. And I think for this whole year, I think people are going to feel poorer. And I think they are going to feel concerned about that. And even if they've actually got a little bit more cash in their pockets, they're still going to be saying, oh, but that interest rate's really high. And, oh, but my mortgage rate is double what it was before. And, oh, but my loan is costing me more, or my credit card is costing me more, or I'm just a bit concerned about going out and spending that extra little bit of money on whatever it is and everything, really. And along with that, I just think the overall sentiment is going to be down. And I think that's going to last the whole year. I don't think we're going to break out of that before next winter. And as we head into next winter, I think it'll probably be another tough year for the NHS. And I think it'll be another tough year for illnesses and things like that. And again, people will be feeling negative. So I don't think there'll be much time during this year for people not to be just feeling a bit negative overall on a general level. I must just say I'm not intending to spend the entire year feeling negative. I will definitely be feeling positive and optimistic for as much of it as I possibly can.
I'm not inviting you round for dinner anytime soon.
I will stop talking soon. It's all right. So that's my thinking anyway. I think the overall sentiment in the population is going to be negative for pretty much the whole year. And given that, I think it's just going to be a gradual ebbing away of people's confidence to pay for property. And hence, across the whole year, I'm just plumping for the nice round number of 10% down. It had to be down as far as I'm concerned. I can't imagine it's going to be up. So then it's just a case of magnitude. And if we're going for a little bit down every month, say, then I think over a year you've got to be 10%. So there you go. There's my random number.
You've given the rationale. You've nailed your colours to the mast. It's all clear. And I completely agree with the rationale, by the way. I don't disagree with any of that as regards sentiment. I completely wholeheartedly agree that is the state we're in, because I then just think about my own personal position and how we're approaching things this year. And it's very much we are battening down the hatches. We're looking at any existing debt. I'm not talking about mortgage, but other debt we've got. How can we pay that off? Whereas it was spend for the last few years, thanks to all of the things we know and love, quantitative easing, the low interest rates, etc. I think for me personally, and I just think about how that expands into the wider world, not that it's all about me, but I'm just agreeing with your sentiment, because I think if people think things are bad and are going to be bad, we're not running around, throwing wads of cash at things. We're just going to make sure that we're looking after the things that are important to us most, and that's home and family, and means we're just going to stay put for now, in simple parlance, and therefore are we going to move? The only counter to that is there's always a requirement for homes and living. The big game for us is just to see how that transpires. But I think, having spoken it through with you and wanting to be contradictory, I'm going to stick with flats, somewhere between 0 and 2%, just so that we can come back to this and reflect on.
No, we're not coming back to this. you said.
So, obviously, we've just shared some points of view, just on our humble opinions of what we think, as Simon said, for fun, really. And we have had fun, to be honest, this conversation. We've certainly enjoyed it. But if you've got any views on what we've talked about, anything that, any points that we've missed, of which there will be many, please reach out to us at Biz of Property. You can also email us now, show@thebusinessofproperty.com, all of which are underneath in the show notes, wherever you're listening or watching. Yeah, we'd be really keen to get your thoughts on what we've talked about. So please do reach out to us. And don't forget, join the BOP tribe. Just click on the contact form below or go to the website. Other than that, we'll see you next week.